Women have been giving birth for centuries, so it's a pretty natural experience, right? Wrong. I'm Stephanie King, professional doula, childbirth educator, and the creator of the My Essential Birth course, the online childbirth education course that's helping women everywhere confidently achieve their best birth. Today's culture would have us think that birth should be treated like an illness or an emergency, and that most of us need other people telling us what's best for our bodies because we aren't the experts. So sit tight, because if you're tuning into this podcast, you'll probably start to believe in your body, your intuition, and find yourself empowered and confident to do what it takes to have the birth of your dreams. If you like listening to me take you through these weekly topics step by step, then you're going to love the My Essential Birth course. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, and definitely head over to myessentialbirth.com for the free downloads mentioned right here in these episodes, and to join the birth course and community full of pregnant moms just like you. I have to add a disclaimer that I am not a medical professional and I cannot provide medical advice. All of the information expressed in this podcast are based off of personal, professional, and educational experiences and are my own opinions. Please work with a provider you trust for medical advice during your pregnancy and birth. All right, this week's reviewer of the week is Anna Bailey, and she says, time out. She says, expectant mama, loving this podcast. This podcast has helped me so much along the way. I am currently 26 weeks with me and my husband's sweet baby girl. Congratulations on a baby girl. We had been through an early labor but hard miscarriage last March on my birthday. So this pregnancy has felt so special but also scary at times. I'm really sorry for your loss. That's so interesting to me that it would happen, especially on your birthday. And I totally understand that. I come from a place where miscarriage was a very quick, small part of our story. But understanding, I think it was after we had that miscarriage that I'm like, I'm not telling anybody I'm pregnant until about 12 weeks. And that was with our third baby. And I absolutely was like, I don't want anybody to know until I'm totally sure. So I totally get that that would be scary. This podcast has helped me see all parts and possibilities of birth, and I've truly felt so much peace and empowerment from listening in. Looking forward to getting into the course soon and hoping to have a great first natural birth in a hospital setting. Thank you for all you do. And I don't have the date on this podcast episode, so I'm going to have to, or this review, so I'm going to have to look back, but I hope that you've already joined us in the course, and if you haven't, I can't wait to have you join. And just a big thank you again for leaving a review. You guys, reviews are what make it so that more women find the podcast. The more you review, the more Apple Podcasts puts it a little bit higher, the more people see it when they search for things like birth. So thank you for that. Now this week, I'm excited because guess what? We have a birth story for you guys. And it's extra special because I not only have mom, but I have dad. So I'm going to take a moment and let them introduce themselves. But I have Carly and Robbie Harms here with me, and they're going to tell us all about their pregnancy preparation and their incredible birth. So Carly, thank you. And Robbie, thank you so much for being here with me. I'm really excited for today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us. We're very excited. Yeah. I'm Carly. We're both 28 years old. We live in Asheville, North Carolina, with our baby girl, Mayla. She's just turned 8 months, and we're very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so thank you for that introduction. Tell me a little bit, was this your first pregnancy then, your first baby, or do you have previous babies?
This was my first pregnancy and first baby.
Awesome. And then was there anything, tell me just a touch about your pregnancy, like how did you know you were pregnant? What did you notice right away? Was there anything kind of like, oh, this stood out to me for my first, second, third trimester, anything like that?
Overall, my pregnancy I had a really great pregnancy, actually. I really liked being pregnant. I didn't have any complications, thankfully, and first trimester I was really sick. I remember that. And then second and third trimester were pretty smooth overall, actually. Nothing really major went on, so I was lucky.
Yeah, that is lucky. That's great. Okay, will you tell me, and maybe this wasn't the case for you, but as far as your pregnancy, what did it look like for you finding a provider? And did you have any issues with that provider, any kind of run-ins, anything that made you nervous or you had questions about? Same question for you, Robbie. And then did you ever change, or what did you do to resolve any of those issues? So maybe just talk to me a little bit about how you found your provider and how that looked for you during your pregnancy.
Yeah. So when I first found out that I was pregnant, I kind of went to one of the main OBs, like the OB practices here in Asheville. It's a really large one, and it came highly recommended, and so I didn't really think anything of it, and just kind of went with it, and went in for the first couple of appointments, and it was fine. I met with a nurse practitioner, I think, but my first, I want to say 2 or 3 appointments, I saw a different nurse practitioner each time, and the place was so huge, and I felt like I was just like, I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah, I was just like in and out, okay, you're the next person in this waiting room full of other people, and at first it was kind of like, oh, I guess this is just how it is, like, all right, like, I just kind of, went along with it. They're nice, like, it's not really a big deal, but I remember one particular appointment where I was nearing, I think I just started the 2nd trimester, and I remember thinking, like, oh, I have some questions, and I wanted to ask some questions, and the nurse practitioner told me, oh, well, we don't really talk about those things until, you're like, around 30 or 35 weeks. Like, we don't really talk about those things, because I wanted to know about the hospital and how things worked, and, birth. I was, I'm a planner. I wanted to think ahead and all of that. And, so that was kind of like a little bit of a red flag. Like, I don't really I want to talk about these things. And I was just kind of brushed off like it was nothing. And that actually around that same time was when I started listening to the podcast and started kind of learning about some of the questions I should be asking, and how you can choose your own provider, and how you don't just have to go with, the first one you choose. And so I kind of started looking around, and we had a friend of a friend who had used a birth center that was also in Asheville. And so I started looking into it and doing some research, and along with listening to the podcast and listening to different options and things, and started figuring out what I wanted out of my birth and labor, and we ultimately decided together after a lot of conversation, and I think Robbie was a little hesitant about the birth center at first. We ended up switching. I can't remember how far along I was, 25 weeks maybe?
Yeah, a little over halfway, I think.
Yeah.
Nice.
When we switched over to the birth center, and the birth center uses a team of midwives. There were 5 midwives. So I was able to meet all of them during all of my visits, and so I became familiar with them. It was much smaller. They were so much more personable, and much more personalized experience that I really, really enjoyed. So that was really great. And I was really, really grateful that I was able to had that information to make that decision, because it ended up being a really great decision that we were really glad that we made. So
what was that like for Dad? Like, I'm moving from a hospital to a birth center.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Carly said it was a great decision, and I totally agree. The husband of a friend that we had said that it was the best decision that they had ever made in their marriage, which I thought was kind of hyperbolic.
Wow.
Until we went through it, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience. So I mean, I maybe, like a lot of guys, were fairly ignorant about kind of like the pregnancy process and the availability of different providers. So I had really never heard of a birth center. And then Carly started to kind of explain to me more. And I definitely agreed that the care that she was getting, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't, I think, maybe it wasn't really suited for her and for us. And I do say for her because she was the one going into most of the appointments. And I was, sadly, because of the pandemic, had to sit on the parking lot. And I think that was honestly another factor as well, because she's a pretty naturally shy person and doesn't like to prod. Whereas if I were in there, I would have been asking questions every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, I guess the only reason I was hesitant is just because I really hadn't heard of it, but the more that Carly kind of told me about it, and she even, pointed out a couple episodes of your guys' podcast. I listened to the one where, I forget who it was, but they talked about their marathon experience and how it kind of compared to labor. And as a runner, I really connected to that.
Nice. So,
and Carly was very kind of knowledgeable about it, as she is about most things that she really cares about, and very passionate about it. And it was a fantastic decision, and I was really, really glad that we did it.
That's awesome. I love it. And you're not alone. Like you said, like a lot of dads being ignorant about these things, you know, it's moms too, and it's not even our fault. Right. So, yeah, you're not alone. And I appreciate you saying that, because it's not until you know, hear it on a podcast episode or have a friend of a friend that you can talk to it about that is like, oh, it's a thing.
Yeah, I think and to extent maybe Carly, before we went through this process, we're kind of raised on the kind of stereotypical like movie births where, you know, they're in a hospital sitting down and the water breaks, or like the water breaks in a hospital sitting down, and, you know, it's very kind of, what I learned was pretty unrealistic too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's true, but it's interesting how it's just whatever it is that you see is what, I mean, it's true. So you're not alone there. That was absolutely my experience. In fact, I know I've shared it, and maybe you remember, and even if you don't, it's fine. That was something that my provider said to me, and it wasn't until, like, we don't have that conversation until 35 weeks. And I just remember thinking, okay, not knowing any better, and not knowing I could change providers, and it ended up not being a good experience. So I'm really glad that you were like, that doesn't feel right. And now I know some things, and I'm going to change that. So I love that you did that. That's excellent. All right. I do want to touch on something before we jump into the actual birth, which I know is why everyone is here, to be able to listen to that. But will you tell me a little bit about your kind of like daily, this is what I did to prepare for my birth, as specific as you can get? Like, these are the exercises I use. This is what I listened to. This is how we worked together. These are the meditations I liked. Anything like that, if you can get super specific for the moms that are listening.
Sure. Well, one of the biggest things was, like, on a daily basis, I definitely did all 3 exercises that were in the birth course, along with some other just like stretching and like yoga poses, things like that, just to help like relax myself. I did that every single night, at least for probably like 20-30 minutes before bed,
Nice.
to help get a good night's sleep. That was really helpful for me. I also listened to some podcasts, whether it was your podcast or another, like maybe a birth story or something like that, pretty much every day. I had quite a commute, almost an hour commute each way to work during my second trimester. Yeah. So I was just constantly listening to podcasts, which I think really helped me, because I was always in that mindset of, okay, like, what can I learn? Let me hear someone else's experience, like that. Just for my personality, I think was just really helpful for me. I also didn't have a lot of really like close friends that had already given birth. I was kind of the first one in our like friends group to go through it. So I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to about it. So listening to other people talk about it and hearing their experiences was really helpful. I walked definitely every single day. I walked at least 30 minutes. I tried to stay active.
That's so good.
Especially toward the end, like the last, probably 10 weeks or so in the third trimester, it was really important to me to get outside and walk, even though it was the dead of winter. we bundled up and we went outside in the snow and got out.
Good for you. I love it. It gets cold and I'm like, I'm done. See you in 6 months.
Right. Well, I mean, luckily here in North Carolina, it doesn't get super cold. So it was never like, it was always like 30s, 20s at the lowest. So it wasn't like terrible, but I made sure to get outside. That was helpful to me. We did the whole birth course. We always sat down and did the birth course together, and we would plan like a set, like, okay, like tonight we're going to dedicate, 30 minutes to, or we're going to watch the next chapter of the birth course. And that was something that we like would make that decision together to sit down and do that. So that was something else we prepared for. And then I think just toward the end, just making sure we had like our birth plan, and before each appointment, we would go over if we had any questions, especially since, like he said, he wasn't able to come into most of the appointments with me. So I had to make sure that I wrote all my questions down on my phone, like in my notes, so that way I would actually remember, or like, have them there to ask.
I am that person.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was something we went over before each like prenatal appointment that I had.
What about relaxation practice and things? You mentioned watching the birth course together. What did you guys do together?
I did a lot of meditations. I used the Calm app. It's something that I really like. I still use it to this day. I used a lot of their meditations. They're not like birth specific or anything, but that was really helpful to me. I did those a lot at night, or sometimes during the day to like practice my meditating. I would do those definitely on a daily basis. I practiced that. And I would do that sometimes along with the like stretching and exercises and like yoga poses and stuff. I would do those with that. But.
Love it. How about you, Robbie? Did you have anything to add to that, or how you supported her during pregnancy?
Yeah. So we, like you said, went through the birth course. I printed out like the accompanying packet to each chapter, and I read through it a little bit each day after work. And I'm old school, so I like used a highlighter and like highlighted stuff that I thought was going to be important. Yeah.
I love it.
So yeah, we went through that together. We practiced several of the exercises together, like on our living room floor. And yeah, we were in a kind of unique situation too. The last, like Carly said, 10 weeks or so, we were both able to work remotely. So it was basically because at that point we really wanted to get to the finish line, unaffected by the pandemic. We were basically, it was just her and I and our dogs. It was honestly a really peaceful last stretch before becoming parents. So it was a really just kind of almost like naturally relaxing, in addition to the things that Carly did with meditation. It was just a really, I look back on that like really fondly, like those last weeks before our daughter was born. So yeah, it was just a really kind of unique time, and really grateful that we got to do it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, tell me, because I know everyone wants to hear it now, what was the birth like? And if you want to start from this was my very first contraction, and I don't know if you experienced anything like prodromal labor or anything like that, so just whatever that kind of looked like for you, and maybe even like an appointment or two that you had like coming up to it, you know, if you chose to have vaginal exams, and if you want to share that, you absolutely do not have to, but if you chose to have vaginal exams and any information from that, and if it mattered, or just anything coming up to going into labor and then on to the birth.
Sure. So let's see. So I hit my due date, 40 weeks, and hadn't had really any prodromal labor. I think I had a couple like Braxton Hicks contractions here and there, but nothing major. And it was just kind of like we hit the due date and it came and went. And at first we were a little disappointed, but we kept reminding ourselves like, okay, it's totally normal to go past. And
we got Chick-fil-A milkshakes to celebrate.
We did. Yes.
Yes. Did you guys get that from me? Because I was like, every day past that due date, my third baby was in. I was like, you're getting an Oreo milkshake. Sorry.
Every time we had like an appointment or something, I was like, okay, well, we're going to go do something fun, or we're going to get a special treat or something like that to kind of, I had something to look forward to. So that was helpful.
Nice. Yeah.
But so we kind of got a little past that. And then we had, I guess after that I had appointments pretty much every other day. I was, I think, very lucky in that having that team of midwives. They were really, really great about not stressing that I was at my due date and that it's okay. We're just going to wait and see what happens. And here are some they gave me lots of different natural ideas of things to try. A lot of things you talk about in the birth course, like the oils and
dates.
The dates and exercises and all those different things. So we were doing all of that. And then I think we came up to 41 weeks. And that's when I started getting pretty frustrated. I was really hoping that it would have happened by now, and, starting to get a little uncomfortable. And so it definitely got harder at that point. We were pretty discouraged for a little while, which was tough because I wanted to be excited, but I was a little bit down.
Yeah.
But my appointments were good. I think I did have high blood pressure at one of the appointments. But my midwives were really great about like, well, let's give you some time to like rest and relax for a few minutes. They actually took me into one of the birth suites there at the birthing center, let me lay down in the bed for like 20 minutes, gave me some water, and they said just relax for a little bit and put on some music and some essential oils in the diffuser, and then they took my blood pressure again after that, and it had gone back down, and they were like, okay, so we're not worried. I remember thinking in that moment, like, I wonder if I had been with my other provider, if they immediately would have been like, oh, let's induce, or, you know, talking about that. So I was really grateful that they were so calm about it and didn't get worried. And because that had happened a couple of times during those last few appointments where my blood pressure would go up. But we did a non-stress test, and baby was great. There were no concerns. And then they also did have me go do another ultrasound to check just fluid levels and everything. And that was fine. And I did have a cervical exam. I want to say at that point I was barely even 1 centimeter. Let's see. I think I wrote it down. 41 weeks. I was 40% effaced and barely 1 centimeter. So I was a little discouraged, like a little bit disappointed at that. But I think I was glad that I had them check, just because I wanted to know, you know, what was going to happen. And at that point we did talk about induction. At the birth center, they aren't allowed to have any births past 42 weeks. So as soon as I hit 42 weeks, then I would automatically have to go to the hospital anyway. So we went ahead and set the induction date for that 42-week mark. So I knew I only had like 7 days to get moving and get the baby out. And so it was a little, it was kind of like we started doing everything at that point. I went to see a chiropractor. I started doing evening primrose oil, and like upping.
Was that vaginally or orally?
So I was just doing it orally at first, but because I was only 40% effaced, the midwife suggested that I do it vaginally, which I was like hesitant to do at first, because like this is kind of odd to me. Right. But they actually ended up thinking that was what helped me so much to like soften my cervix and everything like that. So I was glad that I did it. I had to do it a couple of times a day, but I did do that. And I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, and then we talked about doing a membrane sweep, and they said, you know, it was up to me if I wanted to do it or not. They recommended it. Excuse me. Sorry.
You're fine.
So they recommended doing a membrane sweep, but they weren't really sure at first. So we started talking about doing a membrane sweep, but at that first cervical exam, it was, since I wasn't very effaced or dilated yet, my midwife thought that it might not be a great idea because it might send me into prodromal labor, but that my body might not quite be ready. So we decided not to do it. Came back the next day to check again, and try to do a membrane sweep again. Didn't do it again. Just decided not to. Again, she just didn't want me to like start having all these contractions and then my body not quite be ready and then not actually end up going into labor, which was something I actually hadn't even thought of happening. So I was like really grateful that they were like aware of that and, you know, talked me through the whole thing and explained to me everything that they were doing and all of that. So that was really great. And then we finally came back, I guess it was 3 days later, for one more time, and they checked again to see if they could do a membrane sweep. And at that point I was a little bit more effaced, and so they were like, okay, well, let's go ahead and do the membrane sweep if you're okay with it. And I said, yeah, just go ahead and do it. We only have like 3 or 4 more days before I have to be induced. Like, let's get this done. So we did the membrane sweep, and that was at like 1 p.m. that day. And I ended up having my first contraction around 11 p.m. that night, and that's when labor started. So it ended up being the thing that worked, I think. It seems like. So
walk me through that first contraction, 11 o'clock at night. I assume you're sleeping or at least laying down.
Tempting to.
Yeah, I'm going to say we were up watching TV for a while until like 10:30, kind of late, and decided, okay, like, let's go ahead and get some rest. Nothing's happening. I think it was kind of like an anticipation of I was waiting, like maybe I'll have contractions, because I was kind of crampy all day. and like a little uncomfortable after the membrane sweep. And I think we walked pretty far that day. We had walked a couple miles, and I was like, like I was waiting for it to happen. I was like, maybe. And then it kind of didn't. I was like, all right, well, let's go to bed. We had gotten ready for bed. And as we were getting ready, like to get in bed, I kind of like started feeling a little bit of like, oh, like this is still crampy, but it seems a little bit more like it was almost like period cramps, but it seemed like a little bit more like elevated from that. And I was like, I wonder if that's a contraction. And I was like, well, I'm just going to lay down. I'm just going to ignore it. Like, I'm not going to let myself get worked up about it. I'm going to relax, try and rest, because I knew that was, what I needed to do. So I tried laying down, and I laid down for a little while, and then I'd have another one. And then I kind of noticed like, oh, like it's happening and then it stops, and then it's happening and then it stops. And I was like, I think these are contractions. And I kind of turned and looked at Robbie, and I said, I'm pretty sure I'm having contractions. Like, they're not painful or anything right now, but like I can feel them. And I said, I'm going to try and like rest and go to sleep. And so we turned off the lights, and I tried to go to sleep, and I could not sleep. There was no sleeping. I immediately had to get up, and I was like, I'm really uncomfortable. Like, it's not super painful, but like, I can't sleep through this. And that's when I was kind of like, I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. If I can't sleep through this, and I'm like getting, starting to feel it more. And that's when we got out the like contraction timer app and started timing them, and they were kind of coming in a pattern.
Which app did you use? Sorry, because then I can throw that in the show notes for other moms that might be interested. Did you end up using Full Term?
I don't remember.
Does that sound familiar?
It does. It probably was whatever was recommended in the birth course. I'm pretty sure is the one we used.
Okay.
Got a green button and a red button.
Yep. Well, I'm like, that might be a couple of the apps, but Full Term does have a green and a red, so we'll go with that.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so go ahead.
It was whatever. No, that's okay. I'm pretty sure it was whatever was recommended, because we were like, because I remember we downloaded it on both of our phones when we like got to that point in the birth course. So yeah, that had to have been it. But yeah, so I got up around midnight or 12:30. We turned on the TV, and I was like, I'm just going to relax. And Robbie brought up the birth ball so I could, move around and sit on it and, change different positions and stuff. And contractions were about 5 to 7 minutes apart at that point, but they were kind of inconsistent. Some a little closer, some a little farther. Then I think we went downstairs and kind of started getting things together. And I think I tried eating something, but I don't think I was able to eat anything, but I was like drinking water, and we were just kind of, fixing things up around the house a little bit, middle of the night. Just.
Yeah. Not weird.
Our dogs were very confused.
Yeah. The dogs were like, what's going on? Why are you guys up?
Were the dogs, so I've been at births where the animals, now I'm going to get really off track, but like, were your dogs very like, okay, like staying by mom, or like doing anything that like you're like, they know? Isn't it the neatest thing? I remember anyways, I've been to several where like, yeah, the dogs like come and like sit by mom, and they're very like, just anywhere she goes, and they come and lay. They just like want to hang out and like make sure she's okay, which I think is so neat.
Yeah, like they know something's going on. Yeah, definitely one of our dogs, Paisley, she's kind of like she's my first baby. I've had her for a long time, and so she was definitely like right by my side, like, what's going on? And
aw, how sweet. I love it.
Yeah, but then Robbie started getting the car packed up, like putting the bag in the car and just getting things like that. But I was still like talking through contractions, and I think I was still laughing and like moving around. And Robbie likes to make a joke that I found like a sticker laying on the counter and was like putting the sticker on a water bottle, just like, oh yeah, let me put this here. Like, just.
I love it.
Yeah, it was remarkably casual, and I appreciated it, because I was probably more nervous than I was letting on, but Carly really set the tone to, everything's all right, it's fine.
Oh, I love
it's
it.
Early labor.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was good to be able to like stay calm during that part, and just I was moving around, and like I was doing some like forward leaning and just like sitting and moving and walking, trying to keep things moving along, because I knew that if it was like that I could stall or something like that, so I just kind of was like, let's just stay calm and rest and all of that. But so we did that for a little while. We ended up calling the midwife at that point just to like let her know whoever was on call that day, like, this is what's going on. We're pretty sure I'm in labor, but it's still, kind of slow right now, just letting you know. And she's like, okay. She ended up, she kind of was, I remember, like, when we talked to her on the phone, she kind of seemed to think it was, like, maybe false labor, prodromal labor, like, because I just had that membrane sweep earlier that day. So she was kind of like, it could just be due to the membrane sweep, like, try and rest, like, it might not be anything. Like, she was kind of just like, I don't know. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure this is it, but okay, like, I'll, you're the professional, I'll, so I kind of, like, went along, I was okay with it, but she's like, go ahead and, maybe take a bath or take a shower and see, if the contractions get more consistent or if they start to fade out. So I did do that and took a bath. And that's actually when I think they started getting more intense at that point. And that was when it was kind of like, I was in the bath and I was like, okay, like, I'm having a harder time talking through this. And I had to, like, stop and, like, really focus and, like, breathe through them. And I was trying to, like, move around in the bathtub, but I just couldn't get comfortable. And, like, I just couldn't sit there and rest. And I was like, okay, like, this is, like, I can definitely tell it seems like it's progressing. So we got out, and I think we were timing the contractions. They were getting a lot more consistent and more close together. They were, like, 3 to 5 minutes apart at that point. So we called the midwife back and let her know, like, okay, we took a bath and tried to relax. Things seem like they're picking up more rather than slowing down. So just letting you know. And she's like, okay, like, just try and rest and, keep me updated and just kind of see what happens. And go ahead.
Yeah, this is when Carly tried to go back to sleep, and about 30 seconds after she laid down, got sprinted up and sprinted to the toilet and, like, threw up. She was very, very nauseous. So I think it was at that point that we ended up calling the midwife and said, hey, like, Carly just, threw up. Like, she was very nauseous. And I think at that point she suggested that we come in. She also suggested, turned out to be one of the best things ever, was peppermint oil to soothe nausea. Which we just happened to have. Like, we hadn't really prepared for that. But luckily we happened to have it. So Carly just got a little piece of toilet paper and poured some drops of peppermint oil on it and basically was sniffing that for the next, like, hour and a half or so.
Yeah. Yeah. That was what got me through the 30-minute car ride to the birth center. So,
oh gosh.
Yeah. I think that was another, like, thing, like, once I started getting nauseous and it was getting more intense, and we knew we still had at least a 30-minute drive to get to the birth center. So it was like, should we leave now? Should we not? And the midwife was kind of like, well, it's up to you. Like, you can come in now if you want to. She's like, I'm not sure if you'll be super far along, but that's okay. Like, they're not very, like,
They did not rush us.
No, they didn't rush us. So they also weren't going to turn us away either. Yeah. She said, like, even if you get in here, like, if you are more comfortable here and you'd rather, be here, that's fine. We're not going to, like, make you go home if you're not far enough along. Like, I think, some hospitals will do that if you're not quite far enough along or something like that. They might send you away. But she was like, that's fine if you want to come in. And so we felt most comfortable going ahead and getting in the car and leaving. So, and that was what, like 5 a.m.?
Yeah.
So it's starting to kind of come into the morning when we got there. And
it was at that time, Carly. It was at that point too that I could tell she was definitely, like, in pain. Like earlier we kind of joked it was kind of casual. Like, that whole vibe was definitely gone by that point. So I think I was personally ready to be around medical professionals and listen to their advice.
Sure.
So I think it was again they another great thing about the birth center, like Carly said, is that they ultimately left it up to us, and I'm glad that they did, because I was really glad that we got to go, and if a bit early, we were there and kind of settled for the next long stretch.
I think it makes a big difference when you have control over any part of your birth, even something simple like, I'm comfortable, I would like to make the decision to be in this location and for that to be supported. So that's huge. It might seem so simple, but it's huge.
Yeah. And it's just, like, looking back to, I'm just, like, so grateful that I made that decision to make that change in providers, because I it's just something that I don't think, especially in the moment, I don't think that we would have like necessarily advocated for ourselves in that moment, just with everything going on. Like, you're not really thinking about that. And even like having the knowledge that we did, it's just, the provider definitely makes a huge, huge difference, I think, and just from our experience. But yeah. Okay, so when we got there, I do remember the midwife who was on call there, kind of seemed to think that labor was going to stall once the sun came up, and during the day, she's like, we see that happen.
It happen.
Yeah, she's like, we see that happen pretty often. You know, moms go into labor in the middle of the night, and then during the day, it tends to kind of stall and slow down, and, you know, we might not be having this baby until, you know, the following night. So just, you know, she was kind of like, you know, mentally preparing us, like, might be a while. She also asked if I wanted to be checked to see how far along I was, or how dilated I was at that point. And I said, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. And I was only 4 centimeters when we got there. I say only, but it was kind of like, I don't think I was disappointed by that, though. I was kind of like, okay, like that seems like about right, I guess. Yeah, so that was all good. But it didn't, definitely as the next couple hours went by, it didn't seem like anything was stalling. It definitely seemed to keep progressing, and I think they were all a little surprised by that. So it was now, Monday morning?
Monday morning.
Yeah, and so then the birth center was like functioning in their normal hours, so we had a couple other different midwives come in and nurses who were coming in to check on me, and they were really great about just like kind of letting us do our thing and wherever we wanted to be in the room. And they would just come in periodically and, you know, check on the baby with the heart monitor and check on me, and took my blood pressure a couple of times. But other than that, kind of just was like, do you need anything? And if not, they just let us be. And so it was kind of, you know, it was peaceful, relaxing. There weren't a lot of people in and out, which was really nice. But so at that point, we just kind of moved into different positions. I was in the shower for a while. It was nice. Robbie made sure to bring his bathing suit so he could get in there with me, and was able to like,
good dad.
Yeah, they had like great, like, continuous hot water, and he was, you know, did the sprayer on my back, and did some of the hip squeezes and things like that we had practiced in the shower, which was really nice. We were in there for a while. The warmth, like the heat in the water, was really helpful to me for helping like with the pain management. And then I also sat on a birth ball, like leaning over the edge of a bed with a pillow for a long time. At that point I was really tired because I hadn't slept all night, or had been up for, you know, since the previous night before, because I hadn't gotten any sleep. So I was very tired. And so the midwife suggested, like, let's lay down a little bit, see if you can rest. And I actually did almost doze off like a couple of times in between contractions, which is like crazy to me that I was able to do that. Like thinking back on like how kind of intense everything was, but that I was able to like get myself relaxed enough that I was like, you know, kind of going in and out of it in those couple minutes in between. Yeah, so, everything else, there weren't any like major complications. Everything went really smoothly. Got into the tub. And I remember when I asked if I could get into the tub, the midwife kind of thought it was a little early. I hadn't been checked again since when I first got there. But she said, you know, it hasn't really been that long. Usually, you know, moms don't usually get into the tub until they're ready to start pushing. Especially if that's where you want to like actually give birth. And I was like, no, like, I think I just want to get in the tub right now. Like, I just want to relax. And I thought that it would help me. You know, I said, I don't necessarily like need to, you know, push or give birth in the water. It wasn't really like a huge preference, for me. I was kind of open to wherever it was that I was at the time was where I was going to go ahead and, you know, give birth. That was fine. So I was like, I'll just go ahead and get in the tub now. And so I was in there for like an hour and a half, maybe. It was a little while, but and then I finally remember things were getting really intense, and I was not getting any breaks. It was like contraction, and then it would stop, and then immediately another contraction, and I was like, and it was over and over and over again. At that point, I was just like, I am exhausted. I kind of hit that point where I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I think Robbie and I joked that it was the first time I had spoken, I think, since we left the house, that I finally said, like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I like looked at him and I was like, I said, go ask the midwife to come back in. I want to be checked because I want to know how far along I am, because if I'm not, if I haven't progressed enough, like, I want to go to the hospital. I want the epidural. Like, I was done. And so I kind of hit that point. And so he went and got the midwife and she came in. And she checked me and she said, oh, she was very surprised. She said, you're 10 centimeters. And I was like, I guess that was a transition then. That makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what we learned, that I was probably going to, it seemed like a lot of other women's experiences had, that was the point where they were like, give me the epidural. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like almost a relief, like, oh, wow. Like, I did it. That was it. I went through transition and I was like ready, and but at that point my water still hadn't broken, and I hadn't had any urges to push, and so the midwife was like, well, she checked the baby and everything. She's like, everything's fine, you're 10 centimeters, but she's like, I'm gonna go gather some things together, like get everything ready, get the room ready, and just let me know if you feel like you need to start pushing, and I'll come back. I said, okay. And I kind of started, to just sit there, and I think it's like almost like a minute after she left, I felt the like pop of my water, and my water broke.
Oh, wow.
Like, and it was hard to tell because I was in the tub, but I was like, I felt something happen, and I was like, I'm pretty sure my water just broke. And then like immediately after, I felt the urge to push. Like, it's almost like it happened like very quickly. Like, it was, oh, you're 10 centimeters now. Like, the water broke, and then I immediately felt that urge to push. So, and I was still in the tub at that point. And so I was like, okay, I guess we're having the baby in the tub. And so she came back in, and Robbie was like, she said she thinks her water broke. And she's like, oh, okay. So, they were rushing around getting everything ready. And I remember thinking in my head, like, oh, wow, like, this is, okay, like, we did.
It's happening.
Yeah, like, this is happening. This is, and I think I kind of naively thought, like, the hard part is over, and I went through transition, and, like, now, I just have to get through a couple of pushes or whatever, and then, she'll be here. And that is not how it went. That's definitely, I think, where things got really tough for me. Up until that point, I had a very easy pregnancy, pretty easy labor. I mean, obviously not easy, but like, I was able to get through it all and breathe through it and like do all of the things that I had planned for and prepared for up until this point. I think that was one of the big things about preparing for labor that I didn't prepare for, was mentally preparing for the pushing part.
I would just say that it was obviously the experience of the dad doesn't, compare to what Carly was going through. But I will say I don't think I was prepared for the kind of emotional intensity of it. So it was really tough to see someone you love going through an incredibly difficult experience. And I think a really tough part too, it was what Carly mentioned earlier, was that she wasn't able to speak for hours, more than, a couple words at a time.
Sure.
So I every challenge that we had faced up to that point, we were able to talk through together. And, it's an incredibly important part of a relationship. So it was very difficult. I'm kind of a natural worrier. So like the fact that, and then the midwives there were absolutely fantastic, and kind of assuaged all of my fears. But it was just difficult. It kind of a little bit isolating sitting there with Carly and watching her go through something really, really difficult. And obviously did the best I could to support her. I'm sure that I could have done better. But it was difficult. I think it was more difficult than I imagined, and I think too. As she was kind of alluding to earlier, we both had kind of like gotten like transition in our head as like the beast to slay during the labor. So like once, and that kind of like came and went without us knowing it, which was honestly kind of cool because I was like mentally prepared for that. So I had that same kind of feeling when she said that she was 10 centimeters. when the midwife said the cryo was 10 centimeters and she was ready to push, I was like, okay, yes, like we're here, it's going to be, 45 minutes, an hour max, and like we're going to meet our baby girl finally. As I was saying, transition was to us kind of once we kind of summited that hill, it was all downhill from there. And again, as Carly said, that did not turn out to be the case. So I would say, for, any, expectant parents listening, just I guess know that it's never going to go to the way that you expect, and there's going to be kind of like surprises along the way. And I'm sure
always
there'll be for if we're blessed to have another child, like there'll be some things that we don't expect that way.
Sure.
That time as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's my train of thought, but so like I said, I was kind of expecting like, okay, like I kind of feel the urge to push, like that must mean like it's going to be fast, and like that's that was it. So I started pushing in the tub, and like right away the midwife was kind of like I don't think you're doing it right, like you need to kind of, she was kind of trying to show me, and like, you need to be pushing here, and like make sure you're doing it this way, and like trying to like help me get in into the right position to get enough like strength and everything like that behind it to push. And so I was kind of thinking that I was doing it, but immediately, like every time I would start pushing, it was very, very painful, and I think I had lost my like zone at that point. Because it was it was almost like I like snapped out of it, like okay, like I was kind of in that like made through transition, and then it was kind of like, okay, like my brain was just done, like I hadn't prepared enough for that portion of like the next hill to get over, and so the meditating was gone, and the like relaxing, like breathing and stuff, that was pretty much all gone, and so it was just, then I got a little bit worried, I think, and I kind of hit like a mental block of like, this is really painful, and I know that every time that I start trying to push that it's going to hurt, and so I was anticipating that, and so I was like tensing up, and I just wasn't like very effective at all, the pushing that I was doing. Like she was like in the right position, and like they were like, we can see her head, and like she's kind of starting to come down, but like she's just not quite like getting through, like you're going to have to push harder and longer, and like hold it longer. But it was, like I said, all I could think about was the pain, and I couldn't just I couldn't get
it can be
that.
Scary.
I think it was a little bit scary, and it was kind of like I just couldn't get past that point. And so eventually the midwife was like, okay, like I think we need to go ahead and get out of the tub, and we need to get you like relaxed a little bit, like let's change something up. And so she was really great about like suggesting what we can do next, and like let's, instead of continuing to do the same thing that's not working, let's do something else. And so I managed to get out of the tub. It was kind of, I didn't really want to. I think I was kind of like, oh, like I can't move, like
you get stuck.
It was kind of like I don't, like I kind of froze. I don't really want to do this, and they were kind of trying to help me up, and I very reluctantly, in between a contraction, moved to the bed. And then we tried side lying on the bed for a little bit so that I can relax and just like rest for a minute. And they tried to give me like some juice or Gatorade or something like that. And they were like, you need to make sure you're like replenishing and taking a breath and resting. And because I did have a little bit of a longer stretch in between the contractions than to rest. And so I was trying to do that. But then as soon as I'd have another contraction, and they'd be like, okay, like, are you ready to push? And I was like, no. Like, my immediate reaction was
don't
just,
make me
no,
do it.
like, I'm not doing this. Like, this is, it was kind of like, I don't know, I had a hard time remembering in my head, like, this is the point where you get to meet your baby. Like, I should be excited and like ready to go. But in my head, it was all I could think about was the pain, and like I'm scared of it hurting. And so I just, like, I couldn't do it. So it was a lot of that for a while. And I think after like an hour or so went by, I think I asked Robbie, like, how long has it been? Like, thinking it had been like 20 minutes or something. And he's like, no, it's been like, almost 2 hours already. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this ever gonna, like, I did not expect it to take that long. And I was just kind of like a little defeated and like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing this right. And we had moved a bunch of different positions. We moved into the bathroom to try the birth stool, which I did not like for whatever reason. I don't know why, but that was not comfortable to me. And like immediately like getting into that position, I was like, no. I sat on the toilet for a little while, and was able to do that, but I wasn't able to push. I couldn't relax enough in like that sitting position like that, I think. And so then we ended up moving back to the bed, and I actually ended up just being on my back, which was like something that I had, just thought in my head, like, we're not doing this. Like that's not what you're supposed to do, is lay on your back to push. And, this is going to make it harder and all of that. But it was like, I guess it ended up being the only way that I could like rest enough to get the momentum to be able to push. And so that's where we ended up staying for the last bit. But my midwife ended up getting a like sheet, or actually she might have used like a rebozo or something, but she tied it around her waist and then like tied a knot in the end and had me hold on to the end so that I could pull against her while I was pushing at the same time, which is what ended up helping the most. And I was able to get the most like force and strength to push that way.
Love it.
And she just, she kept telling me like, you're really close. Like, I know that this is scary. Like, I know that this is the hard part. Like, she kind of talked me through it, which was really great.
Yeah.
Like she was very, very calm the whole time. Very just like, just take a breath. Like, it's all right. Like, we're going to do this. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to count to 3. And when we hit that contraction, I want you to do it as hard and as strong as you can. Like, and she was very like explicit and like, you have to do it like this. And, that eventually worked. And, we did eventually get her out. Took 3 hours, but,
nice.
She did, everything was, she was still safe and healthy and all of that. So we continued at that point. But, so she came out. She did have the cord wrapped around her neck, but they very quickly just slipped, were able to untangle her very quickly, put her right on my chest. And that's awesome. Finally made it through. And I think I said right at the end, I looked at Robbie and I just said, I did it. Like, I was shocked. Like, I actually did that. Like, it was almost like, it was definitely a little shocking, but it was amazing.
Love it. Robbie, do you have anything that you wanted to add to that last part, that pushing?
Yeah. I think there are 2 kind of turning points. One was when Rachel, our midwife, was very delicately telling Carly that, like, hey, like, I understand you're in pain, but, you need to do it in these certain ways. That like she said, she gave her explicit steps of how exactly to do it, and that really helped. The other one, like less technically and kind of more emotionally, was when we could see Mela, our daughter's head, and I saw that she had hair, and I told Carly that, and I think the first sentence she spoke probably in over 4 hours was like, she has hair? Like very, very kind of like softly and like excitedly. So I think sweet. Kind of reminding her the reason like why she was doing all this, because I think as Carly mentioned, she almost forgot like, what this was all for. And I mean, I couldn't blame her at all. I mean, at that point it had been 12 hours of pretty intense labor, 12 plus hours of pretty intense labor with, 0 sleep, 0 calories, except like a few sips of fruit juice. So like, she was, emotionally and physically just absolutely spent. So I think, it was, and I think will remain the most impressive thing I've ever seen anyone do. It actually inspired me to start a website. It's called Essays of Dad. But I wrote a kind of a recap of the experience. And kind of, it just felt like one of those experiences that I never wanted to forget. Obviously, of course, the birth of your first child is pretty typical of wanting to remember it. But it was something that kind of like touched me on a level even deeper than I thought it would. Because obviously you're overjoyed at the birth of your baby girl. But equally strong for me was the feeling of like absolute amazement of like what the woman I married to could do. And it was on International Women's Day too, March 8th.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it was a cool moment. Like we had a daughter born on International Women's Day. Like Carly went through this amazing thing, and then it was a women-run birth center as well. So all the
Very cool.
workers there, the midwives were women. So it was just like a really kind of like powerful reminder of like this absolute power of women. So, and like
I love it.
to Carly, like she like it was for both of us it was a fantastic experience. It was just like I was kind of mentioning earlier. It was just much, obviously for her, way more difficult than for me. But like it was much more difficult than I thought it would be to watch her go through it. But honestly, I don't think we would have changed anything about the experience. So we were really happy with it.
I love it. Okay, since we're pretty much out of time, but I do want to give you guys each just a quick second I like to end with like, what's your best advice for moms? What's your best advice for dads? And I want to ask each of you, so if you can like sum that up in a quick sentence or two for each of those, tell me a little bit about your best advice for moms, best advice for dads.
Okay. I think best advice for moms would be to definitely do the homework and practice the meditating and know what it is that works for yourself. Like know your personality and know the way that you deal with things that are really hard, and like have a plan set up for that. I think that's what really helped us through a lot, like knowing that I was going to be pretty quiet about things and not speak up about whatever, like through the entire thing, pregnancy and birth. So like having that in the back of our head, I think helped a lot. I guess that kind of goes both ways for moms and dads. The advice for dads, I guess, would be to talk about that with your partner, and make sure that you guys are both on the same page with those things. Because I think that made the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Love it. How about you, Robbie?
Yeah, I would kind of echo what she said. I think to me, like birth was kind of separated into like the technical like experience and like the emotional experience. So like I guess I have one on each. Like technically, like find a provider you're like really comfortable with. And like that will meet our needs, answer all of your questions, and you feel comfortable asking. And I think at first we didn't have that, and about a little bit over halfway through we found it, and it was like again like an absolutely fantastic decision. And then the emotional side, as Carlos kind of mentioning, I think just be prepared for the kind of like isolation of it almost. It obviously it's a team effort, and Carly and I were on the same page, but like once labor hit, I don't think I was prepared for kind of like the feeling of kind of like isolation that I had, that I couldn't really talk to her about it and how she was feeling, because it was obviously incredibly difficult for us out. Find a way that you deal with those like really harrowing kind of experiences, and kind of just be prepared for that throughout labor.
I love it. Thank you both for taking the time to be with me today, to share this story in such great detail. I really can't wait for this episode to go live, because kind of as I was sharing with you, we were having a little technical difficulties and my computer was dying, and we've been through a little bit together today. But just, I really mean it. This was such an incredible birth story to hear you guys tell in the detail that you told. I'm feeling like my heart, just like as I'm listening to you, I just love it. And it's just, I don't know, you fall in love with birth stories and you fall in love with birth and the whole process, and hearing you guys as, young parents and your first time together and the experience that you had and how you worked through it together and how bonding it was, that it's just beautiful. I feel so blessed to be just a little bit being able to be inside of that with you as you told that story. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Yeah. We appreciate you having us.
Yeah, and thank you for everything, too, for all your information and podcasts and birth course and stuff. It was such a huge, huge part of our experience. So,
I'm so glad. You guys, that was awesome. Seriously, can't wait for that one to drop. I'm like over here, like next to tears during some of your guys' stuff. Like, hold it together. Oh, it was so good. Thank you for your time. I can't thank you enough. That was excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. We appreciate it.
That's it for this week, but make sure you subscribe to the podcast so that you get notifications first as I drop a new episode every week. And don't forget to head over to myessentialbirth.com for all of the free downloads mentioned here, and to join the birth course and community serving pregnant moms just like you. If you enjoyed this and other episodes, I would love it if you would take a few minutes to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I read every single one and include one at the beginning of each episode. See you next week.